An easy way to spice up a game's typical gameplay loop is with a power-up. Power-ups are little items or boosts that improve your character and give them abilities beyond what they can normally accomplish. There's nothing more satisfying than struggling against a difficult foe only to get a power-up and completely destroy them. RPGs are practically built around this concept, with their focus on level ups and progression. There are a couple of different ways game developers can give the player a power-up, and each one aligns with a different game design philosophy. A lot of the time, power-ups are given to the player as a reward for being perceptive and exploring the environment. These power-ups are tucked away in hard-to-reach places or hidden in secret areas. This makes the levels feel more interesting, and it serves as a way to encourage players to care about the playground that the game developers have lovingly and carefully crafted. Another way to hand out power-ups is a reward for skillful play. Players who master a game and its mechanics should be rewarded. This encourages players to try to perform as best as they can and learn how the game works. The last main way power-ups are given out is a reward for progressing through the story. A reward for basically just playing the game. This is by far the most straightforward approach. If you reach a certain point in the story, you get a nice little pick-me-up. This method is used by game developers simply to keep players engaged. Giving power-ups this way is a good way to maintain a game's freshness and keep the player from getting bored. Power-ups are one of the most iconic elements of video games, being around for decades at this point, and they can be split up into a number of categories. The first two being general and contextual power-ups. General power-ups are power-ups that have more of an all-purpose use. You can utilize them in a variety of different scenarios. Take for example the raccoon leaf in Mario 3. It allows Mario to float over obstacles, attack enemies, and even fly. There's very few scenarios that I can imagine where you wouldn't want to have this thing. Another good example is the power pellet from Pac-Man, the OG power-up. This thing turns the once deadly ghost into an afternoon snack Pac-Man can easily devour. It's a great offensive tool as it lets you take out enemies, but it also is a good defensive tool as it makes you invulnerable to enemy attacks, and can get you out of a jam if you're boxed in by the ghosts. General power-ups are really cool because you can throw them into any level of the game and players are going to be happy to see them. This does come with the caveat that you have to design all of your levels around the existence of these power-ups. The raccoon leaf can definitely break the difficulty of a lot of levels. If you're worried about power-ups being too generically useful or too overpowered, then instead of general power-ups, you can use contextual power-ups. Contextual power-ups are more specific in their use cases. They might only be useful in certain scenarios like the super arm in Mega Man 1. This ability can only be used to pick up these wall blocks, or you could do something like the various power-ups in Pizza Tower. They have very specific areas they're meant to be used in throughout the level, like this chicken that gives you a ton of air mobility. Pizza Tower will typically force you to get rid of your power-up before leaving the area it's supposed to be used in. Contextual power-ups are a great way to do more unique and memorable power-ups without worrying too much about balancing the entire game around them. But on the flip side, you have to design specific areas for them to be useful, which may be even more work in the long run. Whereas general power-ups are useful in a ton of places, contextual power-ups may only get used in one or two places, and at that point, you start to wonder why you're even putting in all the time and effort for an ability that will only get a few minutes of screen time. At the end of the day, it's up to you to decide which path you want to take. Now that we've looked at power-ups very broadly, let's take a deeper look at the way power-ups are used. First up, you've got weapon power-ups or offensive power-ups. These exist for the main purpose of damaging enemies. They could be an object you use like an actual weapon. Actual weapons usually need ammo to function, so while these tools might give you more power, they need something to give them power. This can create an interesting dilemma where players have to ration resources to keep access to their power-ups. You gotta be careful though with this. If those resources cost money or take up space, then the player might even wonder if it's worth it to even continue to use the power-up. But if done correctly, it can make the power-up interesting and valuable. Instead of an actual weapon, a power-up can also turn your character into a weapon themselves via a form change, like the abilities in Kirby, where you turn a different color and get a cute hat. These are cool from a visual perspective as they make your character more interesting to look at, or at bare minimum, they add more variety to what you're seeing on screen. Instead of giving you different ways of doing damage, a power-up can also give you different ways of decreasing damage done to you. These are armor power-ups, or defensive power-ups. Defensive power-ups like the various tunics from Zelda and the Varia suit from Metroid give you more room for error by lessening the damage you take, which makes them great for new players. Some defensive power-ups make you completely invincible from enemy damage, like the invincibility monitors from the Sonic games. One of the most iconic defensive upgrades is the mushroom from the original Super Mario Bros. The mushroom turns Mario into Super Mario, aka Big Mario, and in this form, Mario can take an extra hit before dying. The mushroom is really interesting because it's not only a defensive ability, but it's also an offensive ability as well. As Big Mario, Mario can now use his head to break brick blocks. But what's even more interesting is this ability is also kind of a downgrade, because being Big Mario also makes Mario a bigger target than when he's Small Mario, and you now have to crouch to get into small gaps that Small Mario can get into with ease. I actually think it's kinda cool that there are some reasons not to use power-ups. That trade-off gives it a bit more flavor, similar to the situation I mentioned before with weapons and how they require ammo and potentially inventory space. The last core way a power-up can help you is by giving you more movement options. I call these, well, movement power-ups. In Dishonored, you can use a teleport ability to quickly move to different places on the map. You can cross over large gaps and reach otherwise inaccessible places. It's also a great tool for stealth, as you can move without making sound or alerting guards. The high jump, double jump, and glide in Kingdom Hearts 2 give Sora so much more aerial mobility, making it a lot easier to platform and dodge enemy attacks. The edgy ability in Spark the Electric Jester gives Spark the ability to run up walls and air dash. One of my favorites is the ice ability that lets you make your own platforms. Mario had a similar ability in Super Mario Galaxy 2 with the Cloud Flower. You only get 3 cloud platforms, which makes you really think about when you want to use your platforms. Movement power-ups are probably my favorite type of power-up, as these can drastically shape how you play the game. Something as simple as a second jump can drastically change how a game feels to play. Some power-ups are a bit of a hybrid between 2 or more of these different types, like the animal friends from Donkey Kong Country, which you can mount, giving you abilities like special attacks to use offensively, an extra hit for defense, and higher jumps for movement. Super Sonic from the classic Sonic games makes Sonic invincible for defense, but it also makes him move faster, and he can destroy enemies on touch. Some games will even allow you to make your own power-up hybrids with ability fusion. Probably the most famous usage of this is in Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards. You can take 2 different copy abilities and fuse them together to create brand new abilities. Like fusing Cutter and Spark gives you a Beam Saber. Fusing Stone and Needle gives you a Drill. Fusing Spark and Ice gives you a refrigerator. But this wasn't the first time the Kirby series played around with fusing power-ups. Kirby's Dream Land 2 has Kirby's traditional copy abilities, but Kirby also has friends that he can mount. If Kirby gets a copy ability and mounts a friend, the friend can now use that copy ability. Normally, Kirby can only use his burning ability to become a fireball, but if you use the burning ability while riding the hamster Rick, you can shoot a flamethrower. Cutter is normally a boomerang, but when riding the owl Coo, you get a triple feather shot. I would really like to see more games experiment with the whole ability element fusion thing. Then you've also got some power-ups that don't really fit into any category, like the double cherry from Mario 3D World that clones your character. But anyways, long story short, power-ups are really cool, and we should definitely get more of them.